Young Turks. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur. We've got a gigantic show ahead for you guys. I know you're looking forward to it. The return of the dumbass poll. The three dumbest things that Donald Trump has done in the last 48 hours. Who will win this time around? Last time it was the Mexican mountain climbers. This is dumbass part 2. Three things he said and did that were incredibly stupid. That's later in the program. Hilarious case of voter fraud in Russia. That story is highly amusing and also devastating for the Russian people. And then progressive victories. I have one for you in the first segment, and then I've got a couple more coming up. So there is some good news in today's show. So let's do it. Let's go over here, okay? So Donald Trump has said over and over again, the wall, he's gonna get you the wall no matter what, the wall. In fact, let me quote Donald Trump from the campaign because he was very specific. He said, I would build a great wall and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I'll build them very inexpensively. I will build a great wall on our southern border and I will have Mexico pay for that, mark my words. In fact, lucky for you, President Trump, we have marked your words. There they are. So we're going to find out if that happened in a second. But one more quote from the president when he was a candidate. It's going to be made of hardened concrete, and it's going to be made out of rebar. That's steel. And we're going to set the rebar in nice, heavy foundations. Whoa, rebar. Okay. Good, because the budget just came out, and I assume that there's going to be rebars and concrete and harden this and harden that all over it. Let's find out. Absent from the $1.3 trillion spending plan for the budget year that runs through September 30th is any money for the construction of a border wall. Oh, that's funny. Turns out not only is Mexico not going to pay for it, we're not going to pay for it either. Okay, which is good news for the rest of us. Now, the Republicans tried to make excuses for it. I think HuffPost, in this case, SV Date writing this article, put it in good context, so let me read that to you. House Speaker Paul Ryan's office Wednesday evening touted $1.6 billion in the bill that would pay for, quote, physical barriers and infrastructure and funding for related technology and personnel along 95 miles. Notice none of that said wall. And Trump himself tweeted later that night, got $1.6 billion to start wall on southern border. Rest will be forthcoming. But Democrats pointed out that only $641 million of that money is designated for 33 miles of, quote, new fencing or levees, specifically not a concrete wall. Now, do you want to know who proposed the fence along the southern border? Hillary Clinton. And at the time, Trump's like, a fence, no way, no, okay? We're going to build a giant wall with rebars and concrete, hardened concrete. Instead, what do you got? Oh, you so fancy. All you got is a fence, dude. Just like we told you, he's full of crap. It doesn't mean anything he says. It was just a marketing gimmick to trick you into getting your votes. You know why they're not actually building a wall? Because no donors care about a wall. Maybe a couple of construction companies here and there, but there's no giant industries like drug companies and oil companies and bankers that are interested in that wall. So you're not gonna get that wall. That's how the dirty, corrupt politics works in the Trump administration. Okay, now that was clear, let's move forward. All right, so the other night we had a primary in Illinois. We covered it live for you guys. Every primary night, come to tytnetwork.com/live. And some are great. Texas, we had 7 just Democrats. Those are uncorrupted Democrats that don't take any corporate PAC money, sign up to a hugely progressive platform. And of the 7, 3 won outright, and they'll be up against Republicans in the general election. 2 went to the runoffs, 2 lost. So 5 out of 7, not bad at all. That was a good night. It was an exciting night. Some of the candidates moved into second place, moved into first place as the night wore on. In Illinois, earlier this week, it did not go as well. There were 4 just Democrats up, including the most famous race. I don't know if it's in the country in terms of Democratic primary, but it was close. It was Marie Newman versus Dan Lipinski. Dan Lipinski is a very conservative Democrat. He is anti-choice, wanted to defund Planned Parenthood. Marie Newman got the backing of not just Democrats, but a slew of groups that cared about progressives. But unfortunately, she couldn't pull it out. She lost by a little bit. All four of the Just Democrat candidates lost. In the governor's race, Daniel Biss was a very strong progressive. He also lost to J.B. Pritzker, who spent $70 million on just a primary for the governor's race, which is more than what Donald Trump spent on the entire presidential race. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, especially in the bigger elections, they're not elections, they're auctions, and Pritzker won that auction. He'll be going up against another billionaire, Rauner, who is the current governor, so it'll be billionaire on billionaire crime in the general election, but progressives were blanked in those cases. But I wanted to report the good news as well, and there is good news that came out of Illinois for progressives. So, Zed Jelani from The Intercept explains, in a stunning upset, Chicago's Democratic machine suffered a big defeat on Tuesday night as Cook County Assessor Joseph Barrios was defeated in a Democratic primary by insurgent Fritz Kagi. Now, you might think, well, come on, dude, you're stretching. The governor's race and the congressional races, you lost a lot of those. County assessor, really? Hold and find out why that race is so important and why the establishment cared so much about it too. The county assessor, meanwhile, may seem like a fairly obscure position, but municipal assessors are charged with valuing properties and thus determining property tax responsibilities. Cook County machine politicians have been able to use control of the assessor office to leverage contributions and other benefits. Ooh, that one stings. When you touch the money part of the machine, that's where they get animated, and that's why they spent good money and good effort trying to defeat the progressive in that case, but they couldn't. So what are the ramifications of that? For years, Cook County has failed to accurately value homes, which leads to a disproportionate share of taxes falling on poorer residents, many of whom are African American and Latino. These residents lacked the political power to change the system until now. And we've seen with people like Larry Krasner, the DA in Philadelphia, sometimes when you elect a progressive to a position like that, it makes all the difference. So if they actually now correctly assess taxes and make the rich pay their fair share in Cook County, well, that could affect their donations to those machine politicians, and that could be one part of the issue. But the other thing is you'll actually have justice so that the poorer residents and the minority residents of Cook County are not the ones that are bearing all of the burden, which makes no sense at all, especially in an area that is controlled by Democrats. So if you got Democrats looking out for their donors, they're not going to look out for you. You got progressives, they do look out for you. So now Our Revolution was a big part of this campaign. Our Revolution chair in Illinois, Clem Balanoff, said, we've made a conscious decision to make this a top priority. And they did make it a top priority, and when they did, it made all the difference. And they won the race. The progressives won the race there. So now let me give you some more context here. The race for assessor, typically a quiet down ballot affair, had a much higher profile this year, and this is from the Chicago Tribune. Had a much higher profile this year because it became a test of the ability of progressives in the wake of US Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign to take on establishment Democrats and win. So that's how the Chicago Tribune set the story up. So this is not Monday morning quarterbacking. Before the election, progressive groups said it was a top priority. The establishment Democrats wanted to make sure to protect that money seat. The local paper said this is really important and it'll be the test. Well, in that case, the progressives won the test and passed the test. So that is indeed very good news. But it's not the only good news coming out of Illinois. Let me give you the rest. Several other down ballot races also featured strong performances by upstart candidates. Daniel J. Burke, who's been in the state house since 1990, was defeated in his Democratic primary by Aaron Ortiz. Ortiz is an educator and high school counselor at a public school in the Chicago area and ran on establishing tuition-free undergraduate college, legalizing marijuana, single-payer health care, and ending cash bail. In the 4th House District, Delia Ramirez won her primary by a large margin. Brandon Johnson, a Chicago Teachers Union organizer, edged out machine-aligned Richard Boykin in a startling upset. So indeed, very good news coming out of Illinois as well. We'll put the link to the Intercept story down below in the description box on YouTube and the comment section on Facebook. Read it for yourself. And so Illinois, mixed results, admittedly, some disappointing losses, but some significant wins as well. On to the next primary we go. All right, and on to the next break we go. When we come back, we've got Donald Trump doing startlingly dumb things. We've got progressives doing wonderful things. That about summarizes the Young Turks. We'll be back. All right, huge show. We got to keep rolling. Let's go to the next story. I got good news for you guys. Okay. Brent Welder running for office in Kansas' 3rd district. He's a TRT member and a former Wolfpack volunteer. Worked on Bernie Sanders, or was appointed to as a Bernie Sanders delegate for the Democratic Platform Committee, introduced a resolution to get money out of politics. He's winning. He's winning by 7 points in his district against the Republican incumbent. Good news today is that another group has come out and endorsed him. He was already endorsed by Just Democrats, Our Revolution, and so many of the other Progressive Change Campaign Committee, all the giant progressive groups in the country. But now the Congressional Progressive Caucus has come out in favor of Brent Welder. They've only done 13 of these nominations throughout the whole country. So this is the group that has Raul Grijalva, Ro Khanna, Barbara Lee, Maxine Waters, John Lewis, Keith Ellison, Bernie Sanders. So the most progressive group in Congress today has endorsed Brent Welder, and his Democratic opponent in the primary is a moderate. His name, well, I guess his nickname is Moderate Mike. Why? Because he has two slogans, among many, many different reasons, but I love these two. One is leading from the middle. Not joking, that's his actual slogan. And another one, the courage to compromise. Okay. Man, when I get into office, I will not fight for you. I will immediately compromise. That is thrilling, man. You really got me revved up. And then he just said this about Bernie Sanders. He says, Bernie has, quote, disruptive ideas. This is from Moderate Mike. And rarely any credible plans on how to implement or pay for them. That is not progressive. That's reckless. I don't know why he's doing that. It's a preposterously bad political idea too. That district in the primaries went heavily for Bernie Sanders and then actually went for Hillary Clinton in the general election. Yes, it's in the middle of Kansas, and yes, it is a progressive district. And right now it has a horrible Republican incumbent, Kevin Yoder, the #1 recipient of payday lender money. But luckily, Brent Welder is going to get him out of there. So check out his endorsements at brentwelder.com/endorsements. We'll have all the links down below. But most importantly, you got to put him over the top. The way you do that is knocking on doors. So if you can volunteer in his district, fantastic. If you can't, let's get him to $50,000 on tytkansas.com. Now we're really, really close. So let's get to $50,000 and finish this thing so he can get a field team. Look at how close we are. We're right there on the doorstep. So let's see if we can get that to $50,000 as soon as possible so he could send his field team out in the field, start knocking on doors, and put away the nonsense leading from the middle guy, and most importantly, put away Kevin Yoder and get that incredibly corrupt Republican out from that seat and get it for a strong progressive like Brent Welder. Okay, now, I got other good news for you guys. You want to talk about strong progressives? Allison Hartson, running against Dianne Feinstein in California, has got a new ad out. Uh-oh, here we go. I knew she was going to run ads, but as we suspected, they are heavy hitting. Let's watch the first one.
Will you co-sponsor Senator Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill?
Not at this stage.
Dianne, you've been in Congress for a quarter of a century. When are you going to be ready for Medicare for All? Why don't you just be honest with the voters and say that you're never going to be ready because that's not what your donors want?
After that town hall, she went and raised money from healthcare companies. While our families are suffering, she's collecting checks.
The people overwhelmingly want Medicare for All, but big pharma donors profit off of a sick America. There is no excuse for this in a democracy. I'm going to make sure that this entire country has health care by fighting for a Medicare for All system now. We cannot afford to keep waiting for the wealthiest nation in the world to have a healthy and prosperous people. And I'm not going to take a dime of corporate money so that you can be confident that my fight is for you. It's time that California has a senator who will lead, not follow the money.
Damn, there we go. There's a real political ad right there for you guys, laying down the hammer. Dianne, you're never gonna be ready. You know, Feinstein's been in office for 50 years. 50 years. If you can't do it by then, you're never ever gonna do it. So don't pretend you're for universal health care coverage, because you are not. Let's get a real progressive in there and actually have the people of California be represented instead of Dianne Feinstein voting for Bush's tax cuts, voting for Bush's Iraq war, where then her husband got rich off of defense contracts that he got, and she's never going to do Medicare for All. And Allison Hartson coming with a 2x4 over there saying, while our families were suffering, she was collecting checks. So this is exactly why Allison has outraised Dianne Feinstein and another person in the race combined, okay, with small dollar donations. She has more volunteers than everyone else in the race combined. So in fact, let's go to that AllisonHartson.com/now. Lets you volunteer for her. If you're in California, go knock on doors. It makes a huge difference. But you could actually volunteer all across the country. You can make phone calls for her. It's super easy to do it. You can do it in about 15 seconds. We'll have the links down below. You just click on them and you get going. And then, of course, those small dollar donations make all the difference. JustDemocrats.com/Allison. Go do a donation. Small dollar amount under $200 is great. $3 is great. Any amount you can give is great, so we can beat those corporate Democrats and actually get Medicare for all and a real progressive who represents us. So now with these serious ads out there, here comes Allison. In fact, one of the other things you do when you donate is give her the ability to run that ad more and more in California so people can find out how awful Dianne Feinstein's record is. I mean, what she mentioned there is, she tells this constituent, I'm not ready for Medicare for all yet. Dianne Feinstein says that. Then a week later, she goes and collects checks from healthcare industry and represents her donors instead. You gotta get her out, get her out, get her out, get her out. You got a real progressive alternative here. Let's go win this race. All right, now let's go to, speaking of elections, let's go to an amusing election story, but this one's from Russia. Okay. So in Russia, they had an election recently where Vladimir Putin won. He got 77% of the vote. Now, he did not let his main opponent run against him. And we're still calling it an election? It's preposterous. And then there was allegations of ballot stuffing and other improprieties. Well, Reuters with a fantastic story about this, real reporting on the scene. Well, they saw people doing voter fraud. In fact, they took pictures of it. So I want to go to an explanation of the story and then I'll show you the pictures for yourself. The Guardian explained the story initially. Reporters have photographed what appears to be the evidence of people voting twice in Russia's presidential election. Well, we'll see with our own eyes if that's the case in a second. In the town of Ust-Jigata in southern Russia, near Georgia, Reuters reporters photographed 17 people who appeared to cast two ballots. Laila Koichuyeva, sorry for the horrible mispronunciations. Anyway, a member of the election commission, when shown the pictures of the people who apparently voted twice, said, they could be twins. Well, that would be a hell of a coincidence. 17 sets of twins voting nearby in one voting station after another after another. In fact, let's show you these so-called twins and see what you think. Those are two different polling stations separated by just a couple of hundred yards, and that appears to be the same guy. Same face, same exact outfit, voting twice, it looks like. All right, let's show you the second guy. Yeah, that's the same guy again. Here's the third. That's the same woman, two different voting areas. That looks like it's fraud. All right, let me show you more of the pictures. Yep, nope, those are definitely the same people. Okay, don't give me this body double Saddam Hussein nonsense. Okay, those are the same people voting again and again. In fact, Reuters caught up with them and figured out who they were. So now we go to Reuters saying, many appeared to be state employees and some showed up in groups and in minibuses bearing the names of state-provided services. Gee, I wonder who put them up to it. I can't quite tell. Approached about the incident. Okay, this is great. Actually, before reading this to you, let me explain to you. They caught up with one of the women. They had pictures of her voting in polling station 215 and 216. Okay, so they asked her about it, and then they explained this way. Approached about the incident, this woman said she had voted only once at a third polling station, number 217. Oops. She's like, no, I only voted once. I voted at 217. Well, we got pictures of you at 215 and 216. Oops. So they voted at least twice, but perhaps far more than that. And Reuters explains this is a practice known in Russia as a carousel. If it's common enough to have a name, it's probably something that's done quite often. at least during the reign of Vladimir Putin. Now, one more from Reuters here. Larissa Tekeyeva, head of the Election Commission for polling station 216, said after looking at a picture of a woman in a pink coat who voted at the polling stations 216 and 217, we all have the same mentality. We all look alike. That's a second possible explanation. They could all be twins, or all Russians look alike and have the same pink coat. Could happen, and we all think alike. Apparently so, because in this district, Putin got 89.86% of the vote. Yes, you all think alike when they send in the buses from the government to vote over and over in that district. Okay. When Reuters reporters asked how the officials could go home at that point, given other irregularities that were pointed out by Reuters to the people at the voting stations, the director of the school hosting the polling station said, quote, "You want to cast doubt on Putin's victory?" And the answer to that in Russia is almost always, no, I do not want to cast doubt on Putin's victory. And this is how you steal an election. Well, at least in this case, he was stealing an election in his own country. Young Turks. All right, guys, we'll do tweets later in the program, and we've got a Facebook debacle to tell you about, a Kushner debacle as well. Lots to do, but I got to give you more stories as quickly as I can. We're obviously back on the Young Turks. Let's go over here. Okay. So Donald Trump trying to outdo himself again. Last week we had a poll on the dumbest thing he said in 24-hour span, and there were 3 significant competitors. Check that out at tytnetwork.com/dumbass. We will have a link down below for you guys in the description box on YouTube, comment section on Facebook. Okay, so now, to be fair to Donald Trump, this time he took 2 days to do 3 incredibly dumb things. So let me share it with you guys, and then we'll do a second poll, and it'll be fun. So he recently tweeted about the special counsel, except he spelled not just counsel wrong, he spelled weather wrong, he put the twice. Here, let me show you the tweets. He writes, special counsel is told to find crimes. That's not how you spell counsel in that case. Whether crimes exist or not, that's not how you spell whether. I was opposed to the selection of Mueller to be special counsel, spelled wrong again. I'm still opposed to it. I think President Trump was right when he said there never should have been a special counsel appointed because there was no probable cause for believing that there was any crime, collusion, or otherwise, or obstruction of justice. So stated by Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz. Okay, now Dershowitz didn't write it like that. Dershowitz is now a total right-wing zealot, especially on the issue of foreign policy. So he's like, oh yeah, Harvard law professor's on my side. Oh, okay, you have a neoconservative, right-winger on your side. Big surprise. Anyway, of course, Dershowitz at least would be smart enough not to misspell counsel, and Trump did it 3 times. That's okay. Sometimes he gets carried away in his tweets. It's not really okay, he's the president. If Obama had made those errors, they'd be like, oh, we knew it. It was affirmative action that got him into Columbia and Harvard law. We knew it, right? And they'd ask for his transcripts, which is what Donald Trump did. I'd love to see Donald Trump's transcripts. Really, you went to Wharton and you passed those classes? You got good enough grades at Fordham to transfer into Wharton? Now your daddy got you in, you're an idiot. You don't know how to, you have no idea how to spell. Anyway, the other idiots that surround him go, oh, Mr. President, oh, you got a misspelling there. You misspelled weather in that case, okay? So they put out a new version of it, and let's look at the new version. Yeah, now the weather, no, that's not it. Let's go to the graphic 71. So in the new version, weather is now correctly spelled in this case, and they took out the extra the. But all the idiots at the White House kept counsel misspelled in the new version too. Oh, they are so dumb. Look, if you don't know how to spell counsel in the 2 different cases, fine, man, but you're not the president of the United States and you're not putting out a public tweet about the special counsel, the guy that you can't stand, the one that's hounding you, the one that might take you out of office. Just take a second, look it up online or something. Don't embarrass yourself like this day in and day out. So a couple of fun tweets about it. Person writes in here, shows all the mistakes, gives him an F, and then says, stay in school, kids. That was Ryan Parker. And then Keith Boykin with a funny tweet as well. He says, dear Donald, it's special counsel, not the special counsel. A counsel is a group of people like a student council. A counsel is a lawyer like the people you hire to pay off porn stars. Boykin also pointed out that Fox News also misspelled it. That's probably where Trump got it from. Okay, but we're not done. So that's entrant number 1 into the race of dumbest thing Donald Trump has said in the last 24 hours. Well, today he's going to introduce Lockheed Martin CEO and brag about the F-35. And her name is Marilyn Hewson, okay, Marilyn Hewson. So I want you to remember that as he introduces her, get a load of what he calls her, and then what he says about the F-35, because we have 2 contestants from this one small video. Let's watch.
We have some of our great business leaders and leaders, period, right behind me. I may ask Marilyn Lockheed, the leading woman's business executive in this country, according to many. And we buy billions and billions of dollars worth of that beautiful F-35. It's stealth. You cannot see it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Better be correct, right?
Absolutely.
Marilyn, please say a few words.
Okay, let's break it down. Number one, her name is not Marilyn Lockheed. The name of the company is Lockheed Martin. Look, you can say that he misspoke, but somebody write it down for him. And again, you're the president, you're on camera. I'm gonna vote against that one because of all the different dumb things he does that seems benign by comparison, but we put it in the poll for you guys. My favorite one out of that clip was, it's invisible, right? It's invisible, and you're Wonder Woman, right? Yeah, it's not, and then she's embarrassed, and she's like, yes, Mr. President, it's invisible. This is from Lockheed Martin's own website. Stealth is not invisibility. Rather, stealth gives the F-35 the ability to elude or greatly complicate an enemy's ability to find and destroy an aircraft using a combination of design, tactics, and technology. It allows you to evade radar. It is not an invisible plane, you dumbass. Okay, the president doesn't know we don't have invisible planes. Oh my God, all right. So what is the dumbest thing Donald Trump has done in the last 2 days? You guys get to vote, tytnetwork.com/dumbass2. Number one, misspell special counsel. Number two, call CEO of Lockheed Martin, Marilyn Lockheed. Now that I say it out loud, it's pretty funny. And number three, say that a stealth fighter is invisible. Okay, looking forward to the results. The links are down below. Make sure you click on them and vote early and often. Okay, so curious as to how that's gonna turn out. We're moving forward. I'm going to an important story about the president's lawyer. Okay. Hold, okay. So one of the president's lawyers has stepped down. His name is John Dowd. There are a number of possible reasons why he did this and important ramifications, so let's break it down. First, we go to Ross' story. He had considered resigning for months because he, quote, ultimately concluded that Mr. Trump was increasingly ignoring his advice, and New York Times originally reporting that. And Dowd has repeatedly tried to warn the president against doing a face-to-face interview with special counsel Robert Mueller, whereas Trump himself has said that he believes he should do an interview with the special counsel. Now, Andrew Napolitano, Fox News legal analyst, went out on TV today again, was like, Mr. President, don't do that. Don't do that. Basically, all these lawyers saying, no, you knucklehead, you don't get it. Robert Mueller is infinitely smarter than you. And we know you're a pathological liar. You're gonna lie on the record about 17 times per minute, and then he'll have you for sure. But of course, when his lawyer tells him that, Trump's like, oh no, I got this. I'm way smarter than Mueller. I'm gonna outsmart him. Because you know why, guys? You know why? Because I'm a very stable genius. Okay, all right, if you say so. So if Dowd was counseling him not to talk to Mueller, and now he's out, fantastic. Yeah, hey, Mr. President, man, you're like a smart person. Don't let your lawyers tell you otherwise. Okay, so another issue for Dowd was this tweet that President Trump had sent out back in the day. Now, this was back in December of 2017. He said, I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to Vice President and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies. It is a shame because his actions during the transition were lawful. There was nothing to hide. Now, I'll tell you why that created a significant problem for Donald Trump. We're going to go to law and crime here. The argument was that the tweet indicated that Trump already knew Flynn had lied to the FBI at the time and still asked Comey to back off. Oops, they shouldn't have done that. So that was a mistake. It, in essence, admitted obstruction of justice in that tweet by the president. So what did his lawyer, John Dowd, do in that case? He fell on his sword. And he said, oh, it was not the president who tweeted that. It was me. Yeah, I grabbed his account and I did it myself. That makes no sense at all. No one believed that. But that created a second problem for them, okay? Now, as they explain in Law and Crime, if Dowd didn't really write the tweet and Mueller asked him about it, he'd have to either lie to the special counsel to protect his client or tell the truth and incriminate him. So that could be a big, big problem. Now, in this case, Dowd wouldn't even be able to claim attorney-client privilege because he had publicly said he wrote the tweet. Once you reveal information to a third party or the whole world, you can't claim privilege over it. So then he's in an unwinnable situation. If Dowd was still working for Trump, Law and Crime Explains, and was called before Mueller to answer those questions, there's a decent chance he wouldn't be by the time he was finished. So, in other words, if he comes in and says, yeah, Donald Trump wrote the tweet, I was lying, he saves himself but throws Donald Trump under the bus, and then you got an obstruction of justice, and you can't do that to your own client, so then you couldn't be his lawyer. Or he has to lie to the special counsel on a thing that he does not have an attorney-client privilege on, and then his career is in a world of trouble. Now, one way to avoid that conundrum is stop being Donald Trump's lawyer, and that's exactly what John Dowd did. So they might have had disagreements, I don't doubt that at all, but this might also be a reason why Dowd stepped down. Now, one last thing for you guys. I want to talk about the guy that they brought in partly to replace him. His name is Joseph E. Genoa, and he is a clown extraordinaire. He had explained there was a, quote, brazen plot by officials in the FBI and DOJ to illegally exonerate the Hillary Clinton, and if she didn't win the election, to then frame Donald Trump with a falsely created crime. Okay, that's an insane conspiracy theory. I know the president likes to push it and Fox News likes to push it, but a legitimate attorney that would not like to be disbarred can't just go say that to prosecutors or an open court. That is preposterous. So more good news for the country, if you ask me. A legitimate lawyer has left the building. He was giving good advice to Donald Trump in order to try to protect him from a prosecution for the crimes he likely committed. Now he is gone and instead has been replaced by a total clown who's going to go, oh yeah, the FBI had all these conspiracies and they were going to try to make sure that Trump doesn't become president. Well, at some point you're going to be in a court of law and you're going to have to present evidence about that. Where's your evidence? Yeah, I don't know. I've been working with other Trump lawyers for a long time. I think there's a conspiracy, the deep state or something, yeah. Jay Sekulow, another absolute amateur clown lawyer extraordinaire, is the personal lawyer for Donald Trump. These guys are way above their pay grade. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Sekulow brought in DeGenoa, and they're like, oh, okay, you believe crazy things? I believe crazy things. High five. I think that the president is in way bigger trouble than he realized. And the problem is that, as Scaramucci said, the fish rots from the head down. The reason he has clown lawyers surrounding him is because he's a clown. So when a smart person walks in the room, he goes, no, you're not smart. I'm like a smart person. Hey, tell him, DeGenoa, about the deep state and how very stable genius I am, right? And they go, oh yeah, Mr. President, you're great, man. You're gonna kill Mueller. Go testify in front of him, Mr. President. Tell him about the deep state. A clown hires clowns. Okay. If you're running a three-ring circus, you need a lot of clowns. All right, I think I've been clear on that. We're gonna move forward. Now we go to the Austin bombing. Okay. It turns out the person who had done the bombings in Austin has left a 25-minute confession. He passed away when officers caught up with him. He blew himself up. That was the 6th bomb that exploded. 2 had been killed in the earlier bombings, 5 injured. So good law enforcement to track him down and find out who he is. Then they found his confession. And here's interim Austin Police Chief Brian Manley explaining what is and what is not in the tape. He said, he does not at all mention anything about terrorism, nor does he mention anything about hate. But instead, it is the outcry of a very challenged young man talking about challenges in his personal life that led him to this point. Now, do I doubt that the bomber was quote unquote challenged? No, I do not doubt that. Now, we showed you yesterday that he had written blogs with very conservative opinions, but I think it is relevant that he did not mention anything related to hate, or if he didn't mention politics at all, or any agenda for the bombings, that is super relevant as to whether it actually was terrorism or not. Because if he has a political or religious or social policy agenda, then it's unquestionably terrorism. So I think the first part of that quote is important and relevant. The second part about how he's a very challenged young man. How often do you see Muslim terrorists being called, oh, it's just a challenged young man? I mean, he decided that he was going to mow down nearly 50 people. He was a challenged young man. That guy was going to kill his coworkers. That other guy was going to do a bomb in New York City. They were just challenged young men. Well, golly gee, what can you do? Look, I don't think the police chief means any harm in it at all. I just think that he looks at the guy and goes, there, but by the grace of God goes someone I know. He looks like me, and he had troubles, and his troubles led to this. When it's a Muslim, a foreigner, it doesn't look like me, doesn't have a similar name. I'm not going to look into whether he was challenged. No, he's a monster, and we're done with it. In fact, let me show you two different things here that I think illustrates that really well. Our producer, J.R. Jackson, found these. First, we're going to go to Representative Michael McCall on Fox News and listen to how he describes the Austin bomber.
This is, I guess, in a sense, homegrown terror. What do you think we've learned so far?
Well, you and I usually talk about these cases in New York. I didn't imagine this happening in my hometown of Austin. I think it's clear from his confession that this is not terror related, although it did terrorize the city of Austin for the last month. I think the nightmare is over. It's time to heal in Austin. I think it was a disturbed young man, a very probably mentally ill type person.
So let me get this right. Even though he terrorized Austin and did a series of bombings, it is not terrorism, because now we found out he's a white right-winger. He's just a disturbed young man, that's all. Well, now let's look at Donald Trump, his fellow Republican, describing a New York City attack, which was done by a Muslim. Let's watch.
The horrifying terrorist attack in New York City, just blocks away from the site of the World Trade Center. And to further investigate this animal who did the attacking, I am today starting the process of terminating the diversity lottery program. Diversity and diversity lottery. Diversity lottery sounds nice. It's not nice. It's not good. And we want to get rid of chain migration. This man that came in, or whatever you want to call him.
In that Austin case, 6 bombs went off. The whole city is terrorized. Everybody's looking at every package like it's going to explode. But it's not terrorism. He's just a disturbed young man. What can you do about it? In the New York City case, he's an animal. He's not a man. Whatever he is, he's not a man. And more importantly, in the Austin case, well, now that we found out he's a white right-winger, nothing we can do, nothing we can do. Let's just move on, Oh, it's a Muslim in New York. We got to end all immigration. What they're calling chain migration is legal migration. Those are legal documents, the heart of legal, legal immigrants, the heart of legal immigration. So he's going to end almost all legal immigration because of one bomber who was Muslim in New York. What are we going to do about Austin? There's so many right-wingers in Texas. Austin's mainly liberal, but also there's plenty of conservatives in there. Are we going to, you know what? Austin's mainly liberal, right? So maybe we should just keep out the right-wingers from Austin until we can figure out what the hell is going on. We got to end the chain migration of conservatives walking into Austin and terrorizing the city. The reality is that we should be consistent. We should care about all forms of terrorism, no matter where it comes from. And we should have the decency to be consistent about what we call it as well. So I'm actually going to go to a Ryan Riley article from HuffPost on this. It makes a really interesting point about one of the reasons why both the media and authorities are hesitant to call domestic terrorism terrorism, unless of course there's a Muslim involved. Anyway, the United States has no federal law criminalizing acts of domestic terrorism. That's something the FBI Agents Association, an organization that represents more than 14,000 current and former FBI special agents, would like to see changed. So they explain, while the US Code defines domestic terrorism, there's no broad criminal statute that outlaws such acts, which means that it is hard to call it domestic terrorism and charge someone with it because there is no such crime. So at least if you're using guns, for example. So let me give you more on that. The lack of a criminal domestic terrorism statute makes the federal government extremely cautious about using the term terrorism when there's no link to a group the United States has officially designated as an international terrorist organization. So that is why if it's even a Muslim American, like in Orlando, and right before he goes in, he's like, I'm kind of doing it for ISIS, even though that's a gay club he had attended over and over again, and he was a troubled young man, but no one called him that. He was a disturbed young man, but no one called him that. They just said he was an animal terrorist. And since he said the magic word ISIS, well, they're outside the country, terrorist, okay? A series of bombings in the middle of Texas, not terrorism, partly for this reason. In practical terms, Riley explains, that means the government doesn't call white non-Muslim terrorists what they are. Then he goes on to explain the federal government would have been able to charge Condit with a terrorism-related crime had he lived. His package bombs would count as weapons of mass destruction. But Thomas O'Connor, the FBI agent pushing for a statute on this case, says the weapon itself shouldn't be a determining factor on when someone is committing an act of domestic terror. Call it what it is. If you have an incident that takes place and the person uses a firearm, a car, a knife, if that crime of force or violence is done to forward a social or political agenda, then that person fits the elements of domestic terrorism. I believe that our right-wing friends have a very strong point of view on terrorism. They say that if you just call it the right words, it'll solve the problem. It hasn't yet, but let's try it. So this was domestic terrorism. Let's call it what it is. Okay, now let's go to Eric Prince. All right. Amazing news story out of The Intercept written by Jeremy Scahill and Matthew Cole. Now, it starts with an interesting fact about the current FBI director, but it's mainly a story about Eric Prince and his company Frontier and the dealings that they have with foreign countries and what they have sold of our military technology to those countries. So they explain, as a private attorney in 2016, the FBI director Chris Wray supervised a team of lawyers that informed the Justice Department that Blackwater founder Eric Prince had likely violated US law while trying to sell secretly modified paramilitary attack aircraft to Azerbaijan's military. Now, I want to go through all the countries that he has betrayed us to for money. Let's note for the record, I don't mind and I don't care which country it happened to me. I don't want it to be any country. But the right-wingers tell me that Muslims are particularly dangerous, and I know that they're fact-challenged, so let me inform you that Azerbaijan is a Muslim country. So he's taking our secrets and selling it for profit, potentially illegally, as you're about to find out, to a Muslim country. You guys okay with that? I mean, I don't know, the right wing's the one that's telling, oh, Muslims are dangerous! And Prince is like, yeah, but am I making money off of it? What do I care about America? You know, he doesn't even live in the country. He took up residence in Abu Dhabi, another Muslim area, if you're not aware. Okay, now his group Frontier, it's also referred to as FSG, retained the law firm King & Spalding to conduct a review of the company's legal exposure to violations of US law on weapons sales and the export of defense services to foreign governments and militaries. The attorneys concluded that Prince could potentially be charged with brokering defense articles without a license, according to a copy of the review obtained by The Intercept. Again, great reporting here. Now, at the time, Greg Smith was the CEO of this company, FSG. And he said the potential violations stem principally from the conduct of Mr. Prince, a US person, okay? Now, what are those violations? Well, violations of international traffic in arms regulations can trigger civil penalties of up to $500,000 or criminal penalties of up to 20 years in prison, depending on the specific nature of the violations. You want to chant with me, guys? Lock him up. Lock him up. 20 years. 20 years. Okay. An internal investigation by his own company said the evidence strongly suggests that Mr. Prince was offering a foreign defense article, i.e. an attack aircraft, for sale to Azerbaijan MOD. Oops. Now, his own company looked into this. Obviously, there was internal disagreements about whether they should be doing illegal things like this. The CEO didn't want to. In this case, Greg Smith. Eric Prince led those efforts. So the lawyers were hired at King and Spalding. They seemed to confirm what was happening, and then they turned it over to the US government at some point. So let me give you more details. The 2015 internal report by FSG's lawyers from King and Spalding concluded that, quote, based on the information available, it appears likely that Mr. Prince engaged in brokering activities without the necessary approval from the US in connection with the attempted sale of the secretly modified paramilitary aircraft to Azerbaijan's Ministry of Defense. So, did the Justice Department do anything about it? Now, for progressives, brace for impact, because this is really frustrating. What action, if any, the Justice Department took after Wray's team shared their initial findings has not been made public. Quote, we were perplexed by the lack of immediate action by state and justice departments, the former senior FSG official told The Intercept, adding that he and others at the company got the impression that, quote, nobody wanted to dig into this until after the 2016 election. So the Justice Department under Obama was like, oh, Eric Prince's own company has turned him in, saying he is, quote, likely doing significantly illegal acts, selling our technology to foreign countries for money. That's a 20-year prison sentence if he's caught. Don't worry, Hillary Clinton will win and she'll deal with it. Let's not do anything until after the election. Oops, Donald Trump wins. Eric Prince and his family have given a tremendous amount of political donations to Donald Trump. Now all of a sudden, Eric Prince is free to go. Not only that, he's lobbying to start a mercenary army, a private army within the Pentagon that would report to Eric Prince. Trump pushed for it. Now they didn't get that in any of the legislation, but they did get a private intelligence sector set up within the US government that has been privatized. Our intelligence community, a part of it has been privatized. And that was one of the things that Eric Prince was pushing for. By the way, Eric Prince's sister, Betsy DeVos, the current education secretary. So it looks like if you want to build a swamp, you just go give money to Donald Trump. And then when he wins office, you don't have to worry about rule of law. There's no more rule of law. You don't have to suffer any consequences. All your legal problems go away. All of a sudden, your sister becomes a cabinet secretary. You go have meetings with the Russians in Seychelles Island, another controversy surrounding Eric Prince. But he's not done selling this out just to Azerbaijan. They also point out on Sunday, Prince and Oliver North, speaking of traitors, of Iran-Contra fame, hosted a fundraiser at Prince's home in Virginia for his longtime friend, California Republican Representative Dana Rohrabacher. Dana Rohrabacher, known as Putin's favorite congressman. If you think Trump's over the top in his praise of Vladimir Putin, you should get a load of Rohrabacher. So these guys who claim to be patriots, whoever's got money, Putin, Rohrabacher, the Gulf countries, African countries, Azerbaijan, who cares? They'll take your money and sell out America and our secrets. Okay, but we have still not gotten actually to the number one problem. Soon after Smith reported Prince's potential violations to the State Department, Smith was forced out of the company and Prince and his Chinese business partners consolidated power. Smith tried to do the right thing and follow the law. They're like, do you know what we do? We're mercenaries. No, you're fired. No, we do not accept good guys. I don't know if you heard that as we were hiring. No, only bad guys here at Frontier. So now that's part of it. But the most important part was the end there. Wait, did they say business partners that are from China? Well, are they private? Are they state-owned? Let's find out. At the time, Prince was being investigated by US law enforcement and his communications were being monitored. What began as an investigation into Prince's attempts to sell defense services in Libya, by the way, another Muslim country, and other countries in Africa, widened to include allegations that Prince received assistance from Chinese intelligence to set up an account for his Libya operations through the Bank of China. So Eric Prince is working with the Chinese to help governments in the Middle East and Africa and places like Azerbaijan maintain themselves, maintain their power, crush the opposition, get access to US military goods that they are not supposed to have access to. But is it owned by the Chinese government? Let's find out. FSG's single largest shareholder is CITIC Group, the Chinese government's largest state-owned investment firm. CITIC, which recently invested another $60 million in FSG, is the company's largest single shareholder. Eric Prince literally works for the Chinese government. And this is the guy that is being trusted to run either a private army or private intelligence agency within the US government. I can't imagine a larger violation of national security. So his secret dealings with the Russians on Seychelles Island and the fundraisers for their favorite congressman seem like peanuts compared to this. Even giving Azerbaijan military goods that they're not supposed to have that are unauthorized. I mean, that's a 20-year sentence. That is not peanuts. That is a significant issue. But to do this at the behest of the Chinese government, to give away our defense goods to Azerbaijan because China told you to say that they are not patriots is the greatest understatement you could have. They don't care about America at all. All they care about is money. And they will sell us out and have apparently already sold us out to the highest bidder. Okay. All right, guys, one last story. I love this story. In this hour at least. Okay, so you might have heard that Toys R Us has gone bankrupt. They're going to close all their stores in the US. And you might have heard different reasons for that, but you probably didn't hear the most important one. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. So first of all, CNN explains the company told employees on Wednesday that it would close or sell its US stores after 70 years in business. So is it market reasons? You know, you've got Amazon that's causing troubles obviously for the retail industry. You've got other competitors. Well, let's find out. Toys R Us debt problems. Oh, debt problems. That's not often talked about. Date back to well before Amazon was a major threat. Its debt was downgraded to junk bond status in January of 2005, at a time when Amazon sales were just 4% of their current level. So Toys R Us started having problems way before Amazon grew into the Goliath that it is now. So that is not the heart of the problem. Well, things were about to get worse for Toys R Us. A year later, the company was taken private by KKR, Bain Capital, and real estate firm Vornado. Vornado also has a deal with the Kushners, by the way. The $6.6 billion purchase left it with $5.3 billion in debt secured by its assets, and it never really recovered. Okay, so, well, was it the debt or was it other issues? And by the way, Vornado's deal with the Kushner family is in regards to buildings in New York City, not related to Toys R Us, to be clear. Now, the toy store faced several other big challenges at about the same time, CNN explains. There was the rise of big box retailers like Walmart, which now dwarfs Toys R Us in total toy sales, so that's fair. But what was the biggest problem? Well, again here, Chris Isadora, writing for CNN, explains the company's biggest problem, it was saddled with billions of dollars in debt. That debt stopped it from making the necessary investment in stores, and that meant an unpleasant shopping experience that doomed the chain. This is actually something that happens all the time. when companies are bought by private equity guys like Bain Capital, a lot of times the private equity guys take out a significant chunk of money for themselves out of the company right in the beginning. They saddle the company with tremendous debt so the company can never improve itself. Here, let's give you the scope of it. Even Toys R Us CEO David Brandon conceded in an SEC filing last fall that the company had fallen behind competitors, quote, on various fronts, including with regard to general upkeep and the condition of our stores, exactly as was predicted. And this is what happens when these companies are loaded with debt. But much of the chain's resources were devoted to paying off that massive debt load rather than staying competitive. When Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy in September of 2017, it disclosed it had about $5 billion in debt and was spending about $400 million a year just to service that debt. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why a company might have debt. That is not illegitimate. And not all of KKR and Bain's investments go south like this. And they don't want it to go south. They want to be able to take money out in the front and on the back end. And so, on the other hand, when they are over leveraged like this, and the company has to spend $400 million a year just on servicing their debt, well, it is very hard to recover it. It's very hard to put in the necessary investment into the actual business itself to grow the business, to upkeep the business, and to have it be profitable. So basically, I mean, you can call it a vampire squid. If it's over leveraged, they come in and they start sucking the money out. And then when it collapses, they go, oh, Amazon or Walmart. Now, those were factors, but they were not the main factor. In fact, that burden, the tax burden, crowded out critical strategic priorities like making its stores a nice place to shop and paying employees. And Bloomberg reports, partly offsetting the loss that Bain and KKR and Vornado is having right now, is more than $470 million in fees and interest payments that Toys R Us awarded the firms over time. So don't cry for those private equity companies, because they had already taken out nearly $500 million from Toys R Us before it collapsed. So understand, when your local stores go down, there is sometimes an obvious reason that you can see with your own eyes, competitors did better. Sometimes there are reasons you cannot see, and that has to do with how private equity is structured and how much debt they put on these companies. And at the end of the day, in most of the deals, the private equity guys get money in the front, oftentimes in the back. They make plenty of money, and that is their job. But some of these companies collapse in the meanwhile, and we never hear of them again. And that's how this game is played. All right, we'll be right back. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. March for Our Lives March is happening this weekend on March 24th. Make sure you go check it out. Emma Vigeland will be covering it for TYT in Washington, D.C., and Hassan Piker is going to be at the LA March. So please go attend the marches. And then if you see Emma or Haas, that's great. And we'll try to provide that coverage for you guys on Facebook.com/TheYoungTurks. So check that out as well. And I promise I'm going to get to tweets later in the show, but we have breaking news and we can't stop the news. It's nonstop, and this one is gigantic. So Anna, you got it.
All right. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster has officially resigned from his role, and according to reports, John Bolton will take his place. Now, previously there was some speculation indicating that H.R. McMaster would get fired by Donald Trump. They had been butting heads on some issues, including Russian collusion. And it turns out that McMaster has decided to step down, and John Bolton, again, will be the new National Security Advisor. Donald Trump did tweet about this, as he usually does about every other issue. He writes, I am pleased to announce that effective 4/9/18, April 9th, 2018, Ambassador John Bolton will be my new National Security Advisor. I'm very thankful for the service of General H.R. McMaster, who has done an outstanding job and will always remain my friend. There will be an official contract or contact handover on April 9th.
All right, so let's begin to talk about this disaster. So first of all, he says he'll always be my friend because this is a more amicable split as opposed to Rex Tillerson, who left obviously very angry and was fired as Secretary of State. Mike Pompeo moving from CIA to state if they are confirmed, and then now Bolton moving into National Security Advisor. Now, the reality is there's two different reasons why McMaster is leaving. One is Trump won't listen to anyone, and so when McMaster gives advice on Afghanistan, for example, Trump says, no, I don't care and I'm not gonna do that. Trump pushes for outlandish ideas like increase our nuclear arsenal tenfold, which is totally undoable. It's preposterous. That's the meeting that they all left and Tillerson called him an effing moron.
Right.
Okay, he also pushed for private mercenary army to lead our efforts in Afghanistan. Preposterous, insanity. So McMaster was a slight voice of reason. He's also very much a right winger, but he wasn't as insane as Donald Trump, so they didn't get along on those fronts. And McMaster said, well, the Russian interference is clear and obvious.
Yes, and Trump did not like that.
No, and the other reason that people don't talk about is that anybody with any sense is leaving this administration before it sinks. Mueller is closing in, he's in the Deutsche Bank account. He's flipped George Nader about the secret meeting in Seychelles Island of Eric Prince and the Russians. He's flipped Rick Gates, who was Manafort's right-hand man, and they had all the Russian dealings and access to it. And the circle is getting tighter and tighter, and now he's asked for documents from Trump Organization. So a smart guy like McMaster, who is like, number one, I can't stand working with. Who can stand working with this guy? He's a total idiot, changes his mind all the time, blames you for everything. Whenever he does something stupid, he's like, oh, it wasn't me, it wasn't me, it was him, right?
Yeah.
A petulant little child, and perhaps about to get indicted by the special counsel. So McMaster's like, see, you wouldn't want to be, oh, Mr. President. Oh yeah, I mean, you deserve someone who can give you counsel you agree with. Of course, Mr. President, I gotta go.
Yeah, I think that he accurately read the tea leaves, could see that everyone around him, everyone around Trump was either getting fired or resigning. And so I do think that H.R. McMaster made a good decision in stepping down. Now, Let's learn a little bit about John Bolton. A lot of you probably already know, but for those of you who don't, he is incredibly hawkish. And so Trump was the candidate who ran as, somewhat of an isolationist when it came to foreign policy. Bolton is the exact antithesis of that. And one thing that Trump kept reiterating during his campaign was how terrible the decision to do a preemptive war in Iraq was. Well, Bolton, till this day, still defends the decision to invade Iraq. In fact, he said something along the lines of, all right, so I guess there were no weapons of mass destruction, but it was still important to take out Saddam Hussein. Anyone who says that things would be more peaceful if we hadn't is wrong. And a lot of people disagree with that. But again,
of course. Can I just say, Anna, even Tucker Carlson the other night embarrassed him on national TV. He said, well, obviously the Iraq war turned out to be a mistake. And Bolton's like, I don't agree to that.
That's right.
And they had a wonderfully awkward moment there. And that was one good thing that Tucker Carlson has done. I think that he was trying to prevent this from happening. For all the other things he's wrong about, he is definitely wrong about, of course, belatedly, we were right from the beginning, about the Iraq war. And Bolton couldn't be more wrong. And see, so McMaster leaving is a small part of the story. Bolton arriving is the much bigger part of the story.
Absolutely. And one thing that Trump has in common with Bolton is the type of rhetoric that they both use in referring to dictators like Kim Jong-il in Bolton's case and Kim Jong-un in Trump's case. So back in the early 2000s, the United States was engaging in talks with North Korea to kind of calm down some of the tension. And in the middle of all of that, John Bolton comes in and says some pretty nasty things about Kim Jong-il. Now, we all agree Kim Jong-il was a terrible guy, but approaching it in this crazy, undiplomatic way in the middle of these talks was not the right way to go. He got a lot of criticism for that. Now, Trump is very similar. I mean, the way that he's addressed Kim Jong-un is an example of that. And also, Bolton does not think it's a good idea for Trump to meet with Kim Jong-un. He actually thinks that meeting will go terribly and probably lead to military action against North Korea.
So this is fascinating because I don't know which direction Trump is going to go in regards to foreign policy, which I'll explain in a second, and how long Bolton's going to last. If Bolton lasts a long time, we're in trouble because that means we're going to war. There isn't a war that John Bolton hasn't absolutely fallen head over heels in love with. And he is, I mean, is it fair to characterize him as one of the top 3 neocons in the country? Yes, absolutely. He might be #1. So he loved the Iraq war, still loves it to this day, as Anna explained. He is pushing for the Iran war. Again, literally no one in the country that is a bigger advocate for going to war with Iran than John Bolton. So let's now talk about the different fallouts from that. If you were a Republican who liked when Trump said, oh, Iraq war was a mistake, we shouldn't have gone in, low energy Jeb Bush and his brother screwed this up, and you thought, hey, he's not being tough on Russia because he doesn't want to do too much intervention and that's his policy and his principles. Well, then what the hell is John Bolton doing in this administration? He's the least isolationist guy there is. He's an enormous interventionist. So if you take the issue of Afghanistan, now to Trump's credit, he's like, it's a mess and we should, basically he was intimating that we should get out. Bolton doesn't want to get out of Afghanistan. Bolton wants to stay in every single war zone for as long as humanly possible.
He believes we should still be in Iraq.
So he's still in Iraq. So if you thought, oh, McMaster wanted to stay in Afghanistan longer and so Trump got rid of him because of principle, because he wanted to get out of Afghanistan, then why the hell did he pick John Bolton? Okay, so that's point 1. Point 2 is, what is John Bolton going to do on Russia? And that is a huge question mark, because let me explain the background. There is a contingent that is against Russia in our government and in our public debate. Part of that is because Vladimir Putin's a bad guy. Part of that is because, and not just generically, but obviously sham elections, the taking of Crimea, the interference in Georgia, and the list goes on and on. So those are legitimate reasons to be upset with Putin's government in Russia. Then there's a second contingent who's against Russia because they are helping Bashar al-Assad and hence indirectly helping the government of Iran. And they are aligned with Iran in that case. And Iran is viewed by Israel as the #1 problem. Okay, mainly the Israeli right wing and our right wing. So there's a giant contingent in Washington who wants to make sure that we rip up the deal we have with the Iranians, where we got rid of their uranium so they cannot have nuclear weapons. Now, why the hell would you want to rip that up? That deal is working. We not only got rid of any attempt at nuclear weapons, which they had not yet started, but we got rid of their entire nuclear energy program. And all we did was give them their money back, which we had held hostage in cooperation with the rest of the world. That's a great deal. But you want to rip up that deal if you want to go to war with Iran. But the problem is Russia's on Iran's side. So that's why I don't know what's going to happen with Bolton and Trump. There's one thing that a lot of the analysts are missing, which is how monstrously stupid Donald Trump is.
Thank you. So I wanted to get to that, right? And look, I'm not just saying that to insult him. I'm saying that because we are having this discussion as though Trump is an individual who has sat back and looked at all of the chess, pieces and tried to figure out the nuances of all the foreign policy that's happening and the decisions that he'd have to make. That is not what Trump has done. Now, one thing that you should know about Bolton is that he is a regular on Fox News. He is a contributor on Fox News. Trump saw Bolton on Fox News, liked the way that he carried himself, and decided that's going to be my national security advisor. Done. He doesn't really know much about Bolton. Now, look, this is obviously my speculation, but remember, we're talking about a president who doesn't like national security briefings. He does not like to sit there and think about foreign policy, so he hasn't looked into all these issues.
But Anna, it's not just your speculation, because there's been reports that these are reports from White House insiders saying that he liked Bolton because he kept seeing him on TV.
That's right.
And by the way, why didn't he pick Bolton in the first place? There were reports out that when he was deciding his cabinet in the first place, he didn't like the way Bolton looked because his mustache looked funny.
Right.
I was like, that is the dumbest reason not to pick anyone. But thank God, because Bolton's a monster and I don't want him anywhere near the government. But having seen him on Fox News enough, he got past the mustache. This is how this moron is making decisions. Now, why is that relevant? To Anna's point, it isn't just to insult Donald Trump, and everybody knows how stupid he is if you're paying any attention at all and you're not deeply biased, right? Okay, so when Bolton says, rip up the Iran deal, Trump's gonna be like, oh yeah, that's tough. I'm gonna rip that deal up. Ooh, I said it was bad, Obama's bad. Obama did that deal, right? What's in it? Trump doesn't know what's in the deal. What are the ramifications of tearing up that deal? He couldn't begin to tell. He doesn't even know what the word ramification is. Anyway, so no problem. Him and Bolton will get along on that. But when Vladimir calls and says, Donald, what have you done? And says, hey, wait a minute, I didn't want you to rip up that deal. And now we got issues. Then what happens between Trump and Bolton? Because Trump will be like, what? Vlad, Iran? Oh, you guys are aligned with Iran. Color me an idiot. I didn't know that. Of course he doesn't know that. So when push comes to shove on Iran, I am going to be very curious to see what happens. Not that he won't rip up the deal. I don't know, maybe Vlad will call before he does, or maybe after he does. But if he fires Bolton, the only reason he did it is not because he doesn't love war. He loves the idea of war. That's the only reason you'd ever hire John Bolton. It'll be because Vladimir told him to. And so that drama for another day.
Yeah, it'll be a rare instance where Russia's involvement with Trump would be somewhat of a good thing.
Yeah, look, man, when they interfere with elections, terrible. When they're getting the Twitter and the Tumblr, I don't care about, but I do care about the voter rolls and et cetera, right? But when they, if they tell them to fire John Bolton, it'll be the greatest favor Russia ever did for us. Vlad, pick up the phone.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, an update on Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg's response to the whole scandal involving Cambridge Analytica.
Believe me, everybody wants to work in the White House. Everybody wants to be there.
Get the hell out of here! Run away! Run away! Run away!
All right, back on the Young Turks. We're going to have a great Rebel headquarters for you guys tonight. Sanders is on. Levi Sanders, Bernie Sanders' son, running for Congress in New Hampshire. Check that out. And then we've got a mayor in California that is trying a bold new progressive idea, which is a minimum wage, like a living wage. I don't mean $15. I mean, if you don't have a job, they give you money in Sacramento, okay? It's fascinating. I want to find out more about it. So that's on Rebel Headquarters tonight. Let me read some YouTube super chats for you guys. Initial Burn says, HR McMaster is out as of 5 minutes ago, WTF. Thank you guys, partly how we found out about this. I'm amused by 302 Dre, who just used YouTube super chat to write, read this. Well, and I just did, Dre. Okay, so mission accomplished. Karen X writes in, JB spent $157 per vote, 70 million, that's JB Pritzker in Illinois, $70 million of his own money. Biss spent $33. Get the money out of politics now. He got outspent 5-1, that's right. Can't afford it, says Trump has fired National Security Advisor HR McMaster, but also says biographer Gwenda Blair wrote in 2001 that Trump was admitted to Wharton on a special favor from, quote, a friendly admissions officer. The officer had known Trump's older brother, Freddie. And that is exactly what I was alluding to earlier in the show. Thank you for giving that bit of extra clarity to it. We appreciate that. And transliminal, God, I am having trouble with words today. Anyway, writes in, Bolton is now defense secretary. The mustache has failed us. Indeed. Our members of the day are Stephen LeBlanc and Claire B. Kelly. We got a wonderful post game for you guys today. Brent and I did not get to it yesterday. We will get to it today. Why millennial men are now shifting a little bit more towards the right wing. Ooh, drums. That was based on a study from yesterday's show. So join us at tytnetwork.com/join. All right, what's next?
All right. Following a damning report indicating that Cambridge Analytica, which was a firm hired by Trump's campaign, had accessed the private information of more than 50 million Facebook users. Mark Zuckerberg obviously was asked to comment on it, and it took him a while to release a statement. But at first, he apologized on Twitter and then granted an interview to CNN's Lori Siegel. Now, in that interview, here's what he had to say and how he believes Facebook will be better moving forward.
This was a major breach of trust, and I'm really sorry that this happened. We have a basic responsibility to protect people's data, and if we can't do that, then we don't deserve to have the opportunity to serve people. So our responsibility now is to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And there are a few basic things that I think we need to do to ensure that. One is making sure that developers like Alexander Kogan, who got access to a lot of information and then improperly used it, just don't get access to as much information going forward. So we are doing a set of things to restrict the amount of access that developers can get going forward. But the other is we need to make sure that there aren't any other Cambridge Analyticas out there, right, or folks who have improperly accessed data. So we're going to go now and investigate every app that has access to a large amount of information from before we lock down our platform. And if we detect any suspicious activity, we're going to do a full forensic audit and make sure that no one out there is improperly using data. And that's, I think, the responsibility that we have to people in our community.
Okay, that was his statement. And just to fill you in on this story, it was discovered that Cambridge Analytica had access to about 50 million users' profiles, and that included information that they had kept private, meaning only their friends were able to see it. It wasn't a public profile. Now, Alexander Kogan, the person that Zuckerberg mentioned in that statement, built an app known as This Is Your Digital Life, okay? And about 270,000 people downloaded it. And the people who downloaded that app essentially allowed for Cambridge Analytica to access their information in addition to all of their friends' information, right? Which is why the number went up to as much as 50 million Facebook users being affected. Alexander Kogan sold that data to Cambridge Analytica, so that's the connection there.
Yeah, I just want to clarify two things about that. Number one, they got that information with misleading information that they gave to the people downloading the app. They said that it was being used for university research. It wasn't. It was used for private profit. And it was used to then eventually manipulate our elections, but that was for the profit of Cambridge Analytica. So that was a lie, and so that's a huge problem right there. And so number two is the friends of the people who downloaded the app did not consent to anything, let alone being able to data mine all of their private information. So those are two giant problems that Facebook now has to figure out. Did more people do that? Did more people A, lie to us, and then B, data mine in a way that we should not have allowed them to?
And right, and so Facebook had apparently contacted people at Cambridge Analytica and said, you obtained that information against our guidelines, you need to delete it. And then they just kind of left it there. And there's no reason to believe that Cambridge Analytica did that. And so Zuckerberg seemed to apologize for that. But I like that you mentioned the consent issue there, because this is the thing. I mean, sure, an argument can be made that there's some portion of Facebook users who immediately fall victim to the clickbaity quizzes and apps, and it drives me crazy. They're usually moms. But so they download it, and then everyone on their friends list is now, a victim of this, right? And they don't know about it. They don't know who downloaded that app. They don't know who's accessing their private information. So anyone who makes the argument that, hey, I mean, this is stuff that you willy-nilly share about yourself on Facebook, and too bad, that's how the world works. No, there are people out there who take extreme measures to keep their information friends only. They don't download these shady apps, and they still, unfortunately, got their data taken by this firm.
So a little bit more context onto the claim that Cambridge Analytica got rid of the information 2 years ago. Facebook goes, hey, you guys seem shady. We know you got that information. By the way, Facebook does not reveal that publicly for a long time. And Analytica says, oh, don't worry, brother, we got it. We deleted it, just trust us. And Facebook goes, oh, okay, problem solved. And we found out through the recent investigations, no, they hadn't deleted it. There's people inside Cambridge Analytica that talked to reporters anonymously and said, no, I saw it on a drive the other day. It's still there. So and part of the reason why Facebook doesn't go through a lot of trouble of trying to make sure that it's deleted, one, to be fair to them, it's awfully hard to know whether someone else, a third party, has deleted information off their servers or not. I don't know how you know that, right? One thing you could do, though, is you could ban them. Back then, not now, right? That could have made a huge difference for violating a massive violation of your protocol and your rules, right? And then, but they also want to make money, Facebook does. So they don't want to be too harsh on the people that are using them to buy ads, and lots of ads, millions of dollars in ads. So they're like, oh, slap on the wrist for that violation. Oh, look at this, what a wonderful coincidence. It turns out you're buying tens of millions of dollars of ads on us. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, nothing in life is free, nothing. So social media is not free. You're paying some price to use that platform, and the price is your personal information, which is, insanely valuable to a lot of different companies. They want to know about you, your habits, your likes, your dislikes, your behavior online. And so, yes, this information is going to be sold. The question is, how much of that information and how much of it are you consenting to?
So final two things on that. Number one, people will now use this to make sure that Facebook discriminates against all independent media. Now that's a story that is not told in any of these articles. By the way, the articles and all the press that are covering it are old media. So what is old media doing now? Okay, you did something wrong with Cambridge Analytica. So make sure that you don't have any independent voices anymore, and you should only do quote unquote legitimate news from, oh, what a lucky break, us, right? So wait, Cambridge Analytica has to do with an app that went into people's privacy. What does that have to do with you should only do CNN and Washington Post stories? But right now there is a world of pressure on Facebook to, hey, you better clean up that fake news stuff, and this story seems related to that story.
Right.
So that's it. From now on, only old media on Facebook.
So I think,
and they are, by the way, it appears on the surface that they are now, since they're backpedaling and in a world of trouble and doing PR damage control, looks like they're agreeing to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think that overall you're right, especially when it comes to the stories that have surfaced regarding the fake news. Of course, more of the traditional news outlets want to get rid of the competition, and so they'll over-report it and make it seem as though anything that isn't, a long-time brand of American news is illegitimate and we should get rid of it. With this story, though, make no mistake, this has nothing to do with fake news. Maybe establishment corporate media wants to utilize it for their own purposes, but this is really about third parties who go against Facebook's own guidelines, don't get anyone's consent, and data mine, personal information of millions of people, tens of millions of people. So again, I don't know if they're going to twist this story as a way of doing away with independent media. I wouldn't be surprised, but this story has nothing to do with news. It has everything to do with your privacy and how much of the information you're consenting to or not consenting to getting used by a third party.
Yeah, and secondly, look, a lot of people have a beef with Facebook, as I explained on the show yesterday. And let me also explain our conflicts of interest, as I do every time. Facebook is a partner of ours, but as you can tell, I've been awfully harsh to them in some respects and also fair to them in other respects, right? So we're trying to ignore that issue. And we're also independent media, so it affects us. So I'm letting you know about that conflict of interest. Now, whenever CNN reports a story or Washington Post reports a story, they don't go, oh, by the way, we're old media. And when we yell at Facebook that they should only use old media, and all independent, not just fake news, not just crazy conspiracy theories, but you should get rid of all non-credible, in other words, non-us old media. They never admit it. They never admit that conflict of interest. And if you tell them, they go, oh, golly, gee, this thing helping us is just a total coincidence. Well, it isn't a coincidence. So you can do both things at the same time. You can clean up Facebook. And I know that tackling fake news and conspiracy theories is not easy. A lot of people believe in conspiracy theories. So what are you going to do with all of your users, millions of them that believe in conspiracy theories? We don't, but they do. I don't know what Facebook is supposed to do about that. So there's a number of different issues here. There's the fake news, there's the conspiracy theories, there's the invasion of privacy. But it's not too much to ask for them to handle those as best as they can in an intelligent way, issue by issue, instead of just throwing up their hands and going, okay, old media it is. Let's just drown out all the independent voices that made the internet great so that we can be quote unquote credible.
Right. I just wish Americans were better with media literacy. And that way, even if fake news existed, people would be able to decipher what is and is not accurate or credible in reporting. All right, let's move on to another update. The Sacramento Police Department has released body cam footage following the shooting of a 23-year-old man by the name of Stephon Clark. He was shot and killed in his own backyard, and it all happened when police were looking for an individual who was breaking into cars. They allegedly mistook Clark as the suspect and chased him into his grandmother's backyard. He was living with his grandmother at the time and believed that he had a gun when in reality he was holding his cell phone. And the two police officers fired 10 shots each, so 20 shots total. Both officers involved with the shooting were placed on paid administrative leave. Now, there was public outcry following that shooting. And so in an effort to be transparent with the community, the officers have decided, or the police department has decided to release the footage. What we're about to show you is incredibly graphic. I want to make sure to give you guys that warning. But with that said, let's take a look at the first video.
Hey, show me your hands! Stop! Stop! 577.
shots fired. Stop saying down. Show me your hands. See your hands. .57, he's down. No movement. We're gonna need additional units.
Okay, it's hard to see, right? So now cops in the right wing will then use that as an excuse for, well, it was hard to see, so they didn't know if he had a gun or not. If you didn't know if he had a gun or not, maybe you shouldn't have killed him. So when I see that it's hard to see, I get that the cops have a tough job, and if you're in that backyard and that guy's running, by the way, the report was that the guy had what they're calling a toolbar, presumably a crowbar, right? What is he gonna throw it at you? Did he switch the crowbar for a gun? When did he switch that? I understand it's hard, but we can't have you executing citizens because you couldn't see. That's exactly what the problem is.
So one of the things that we talk about a lot when these stories come up is how in a lot of cases the cops don't want to take any risk. They open fire immediately because that's what they're trained to do. Don't risk your own life. If you have any reasonable suspicion that this person might have a weapon, open fire. And that's essentially what happened here. But what follows is even more infuriating because remember, in total, they fired 20 shots, okay? The guy is on the ground, he is not moving. And just take a look at how they react and treat an innocent guy after they gunned him down. Again, these videos are graphic. Let's go to the next one.
Let's see your hands. You all right? You hit? Yeah, I'm good. All right. He was still pointing. Oh shit! When I saw again, you all right, dude? Yeah, I'm all right. I don't think I've hit or anything. All right. I got him at gunpoint, dude. Right. You wanna? Which one? Do a tactical reload, okay? All right, copy. I think I shot about 5 times. Stand by. Stand by on that. He's still down. He's not moving. We can't see the gun. We don't moving in until we have more. We don't have it. Do you see it? I don't see it. Hey, can you hear us? If you can hear us. Can you hear us?
We need to know if you're okay. We need to get you medics, but we can't go over there to get you help unless we know you don't have the weapon. Sir, can you move? Can you hear us?
He came up and then he kind of approached us, hands out, and then fell down. We can't see his left hand.
Okay, I have to mention something that's important. So after they shot him and he fell to the ground, they of course called for backup. You could hear that in the surveillance, and it took about 5 to 6 minutes for backup to arrive. So for 5 to 6 minutes, he is laying there on the ground, not moving. You have not confirmed whether or not he has a weapon, right? And you're still, I mean, even backup. They're like, sir, can you hear? He's dead. You fired 20 shots. He's dead. He's on the ground. He hasn't moved. Can we please get the paramedics to go in there and see if they could possibly save his life? I mean, it's just crazy.
No. Look, I gotta say it. It's not that they are cowards. It's that we train them to be cowards. If I shot a guy, would I sit there for 5 minutes as he bled out? Even if he was a guy who barged into my house and put our lives in danger, would I just callously sit there? Well, I mean, if I approach a guy who's bleeding out, there's 1% of 1% chance that he's been laying a bear trap for me as his blood is oozing all over the ground. And so I'd rather not take a 1% of a 1% chance. And whereas if I rush to him and I actually put something on his wounds, maybe there's a 50% chance he lives. We've trained them to not have human reactions. The human reaction is, oh my God, I shot a guy, I wanna make sure he doesn't die. Even if he had pointed his phone at me, which is what he was doing, which by the way, he wasn't. Why would he point a phone at anyone? Okay, he had a cell phone on him. But you didn't bother to check, you just gunned him down. Can you not see why we're all upset about that? What kind of a monster doesn't get upset at that? And then to let him bleed out like that, and this is not the only case, guys. This is why we emphasize the training. Philando Castile, for all that time, bleeding out. They won't get him, they won't address him, and then they handcuff him after they killed him.
And that's exactly what happened in this case. I do want to toss to the final video on this, because after they finally approached his body and could see that he is not responsive, guess what they did? Take a look.
Let's go.
Hey, when do you guys want to go hands, cover him?
Or cuff.
Waistband? Yeah, we'll start shooting.
All right.
Hey, man.
We're gonna need CPR stuff.
Look, it's part of the training, man. If the guy's there fighting for his life, dying right in front of you, do not be human. Be absolutely afraid. Handcuff a guy who's bleeding out. I've now shown dozens of videos on the Young Turks of cops handcuffing people who are bleeding to death. Why? Oh, I don't want to take any risk. What am I, a cop? What do I have? Weaponry all over me? I got a taser, I got a gun, I got a shotgun, I got everything. I got 8,000 backup. But no, I don't want to take 1% risk that the guy bleeding to death in front of me might actually scratch me or something, because I see his phone. You see in the video, his phone is right there. There was no gun, it was a phone. Who cares about his life? His life means nothing. We have been trained to be cowards, so we're gonna handcuff that guy bleeding to death. That's not our cops. That's not our cops. You know, their slogan all across the country is, better to be judged by 12 than carried out by 6. In other words, execute them, who cares? We never get called to account. Those jurors always let us off. Better to be judged by 12 than carried out by 6. Let's all train to be cowards and never actually have the courage to say, wait, it's dark. Is that a gun or a crowbar or a phone? No, we train them, just murder the guy, let him bleed out, because your life is 1,000,000,000 times more important than a citizen's life. Well, then that's not our cops. It's just a paramilitary force meant to occupy us. Not interested in that. We should elect prosecutors across the country, DAs like Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, and we should root out this injustice against all of us so they stop murdering us. You're not here to protect and serve us. You're here to protect and serve yourself. It's plain as day in that video. Stop teaching the cops that they need to be cowards.
Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
right, back on the Young Turks. The John Bolton story had to be covered. So guys, we're not gonna have time for the Jared Kushner story. We're gonna give you one more here. And tomorrow we're off because we're doing a technical update in the studio. So sorry about that, but no show tomorrow. We'll be back on Monday, obviously. And I do have, but we're not done yet. After this, we'll have Rebel headquarters, Bernie Sanders' son running in New Hampshire, amazing new experiment in California I want to tell you guys about, and then we'll do a post game for the members, tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. All right, one more story, Anna.
Following the shooting in Parkland, Florida, which resulted in the death of 17 students, the superintendent of Broward County Schools, Robert Rusi, has decided to take measures to keep the students safe, but these measures are not making the students very happy. Now, students are being asked to wear clear backpacks. There will also be airport-style metal detectors, and school visitors will be funneled through special gates. Students will also be issued ID badges, which they will be required to wear at all times while in school. Staff members have badges as well. And keep in mind that there is a new Florida law that will set aside millions of dollars, 8.5 million to be exact, for the school district to pay for at least one armed police officer at each school starting in the fall. So going into school will be like going through the TSA when you're traveling. You will have to go through similar metal detectors. You will have to wear clear backpacks and essentially give away any and all privacy you have as a student because the country doesn't want to do anything about guns.
Yeah, so this is all distractions. Look, I get it. If you're a superintendent, a principal, anyone in charge in that particular high school, you got to be incredibly worried and you take as many precautions as you can, and your hands have been tied because you can't do the one thing that makes sense, which is do gun control. So instead, they're like, okay, at least maybe we can see the gun in your backpack if you have a clear backpack, and then we'll have a guard or a teacher trained to shoot you dead if we see something in your backpack that looks dangerous.
I mean, okay, so what if somebody hides a gun in their pants or something like that? Okay, so is the next measure to make all students wear skin-tight leotards when they go to class? I mean, how much of our privacy do we have to give away because our country is full of politicians that are, getting funded by weapons manufacturers and the NRA? It's pathetic, it's pathetic. Yes, we have a Second Amendment that protects the right to bear arms. Okay, but we also have, a right to against unreasonable searches and seizures. Clear backpacks is not going to solve the problem.
They've turned this school basically into a prison, and they all have numbers now. They got to go through metal detectors. And by the way, when you set up a police state, I guarantee you more of those kids are going to start getting arrested for incredibly minor infractions. Because when there's cops, what do? They arrest people. The real way to make people safe is to do gun control, but our politicians are corrupt. That's where we are. All right, bye-bye. Rebel headquarters. First important update for you guys. March for Our Lives is happening over the weekend on March 24th. Don't miss it. Go to marchforourlives.com. That's marchforourlives.com to get more information about it. And in Washington, Emma Viglin's going to cover it for us at the TYT Network. And Hassan Piker is going to represent here in Los Angeles. So make sure you participate in marchforourlives.com. And then, of course, to suggest guests and topics here on the program, rebelhq at tytnetwork.com. All right, now let me go on to our guests. Joining me now is Levi Sanders. He is the son of Bernie Sanders, and he is now a candidate for Congress in New Hampshire. Great to have you with us.
Thanks very much for having me.
No problem. I mentioned that you're the son of Bernie Sanders because your policies are incredibly similar. Is there any deviation from what we know of your father's positions and yours?
Well, the first thing I think is really important to understand, it's not about Bernie Sanders. So many other folks ultimately have the same views and philosophies that Bernie Sanders has, in terms of $15 minimum wage, tuition-free colleges and university, and the whole issue of paid equity for women. So these are becoming just in vogue, Cenk. So I think that while you can say that I have similar views to Bernie Sanders, I have a lot of similar views to a lot of people. In terms of a lot of progressive Democrats.
So Levi, there's 8 Democrats in this race in New Hampshire's 1st district. Since you're right that a lot of progressives now have similar views, what distinguishes you from the rest?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I have worked in legal services for over 17 years, representing low-income and working-class folks, as well as I worked prior to that at the Chittenden Emergency Food Shelf. So I have 23 years in terms of working with a lot of folks who are just barely making ends meet. So I feel like I can, I have a good connection with a lot of these folks, and I understand a lot of the needs and the frustration and the pain and the economic anxiety a lot of these people, face.
Yeah, and there's some local issues at hand as well. There's, for example, offshore drilling in your case. So what's your stance on that?
It's absolutely. We actually it's absolutely unacceptable. We need to ensure that we have solar, geothermal, and a whole other areas. It's simply we can't have that stuff. It affects water as well as the environment. It's definitely just not acceptable.
And the press has mentioned another issue, which is your residence in the district, and your opponents are heavily emphasizing that. So what is the situation there? What are the rules in New Hampshire, and what's your stance on it?
Well, first of all, the Constitution allows me to run in another district, so that's the first issue. I have lived in New Hampshire for 15 years. My children go to the public school system, and I pay property taxes. So while I understand that a lot of folks have concerns, I can say very clearly that I represent, everybody in New Hampshire. And so the fact is, while it's the 1st district to the 2nd district, that's only about a 15-mile difference. So if you look at where I live in Claremont, New Hampshire, that goes from Claremont in terms of Concord, in terms of in District 2. But District 1 ultimately is only 15 miles away, in terms of which would be Manchester.
And I see here that it says you commute 4 hours a day. Is that true? That's a stunning amount of driving.
Yeah. I mean, well, 4 days a week. I work 1 day from home. But yes, it is. Yes, I do. I do that. Yes.
So I'm going to ask you a super random question then. What do you listen to in those 4 hours of commuting every day?
I do actually a lot of meditation, Cenk, actually. But no, I listen to NPR, NHPR. I listen to a variety of radio stations, so it runs the gamut. But yeah, a lot of NPR though.
Okay, I'm going to get even more random. What kind of music?
What kind of music?
Yeah.
I love anything Sting. I'm a huge fan of Sting. So listen to old. Yeah. That's really my game. But like my father, I really like Pete Seeger actually. So I'm kind of old school. I have 3 little children, 11, 12, and 14. But yeah, I'm all about the old school.
Okay, all right, that's fun to know. So back to the opponents in the Democratic primary. Can any of you guys credibly make the claim that you are more progressive than the others? Because it's so hard for voters looking at 8 Democrats who all say they're progressive to suss out who's the most progressive.
That really is true. So you have some folks ultimately believe in a Medicare for all, and then other people believe in the Affordable Care Act. So I think that's one thing we can differentiate, right? Because we know in terms of the Affordable Care Act, the problem is that there's there's high co-payments, there's high deductibles, as well as extremely high premiums. So that's one thing that we can we differ from. But unfortunately, I haven't really had the opportunity to debate and talk in depth with a lot of the other folks, since, as you know, I just got in the race.
Yeah, okay, I understand that. And so obviously you're for Medicare for all in that split.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's absolutely imperative that we have Medicare for all.
Okay, great. So in this district, Trump actually won it by 2 points. And although you had Carol Shea Porter, who's a Democrat, who was the congressperson there, now retiring, so that's why it's an open seat with all those Democrats vying for the seat. But they also voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012. So what do you think happened there? I think that's a really interesting case of a district that was Democratic that went over to Trump. Why?
Right. So what's really interesting is Carol Shea Porter won, then she lost, then she won, then she lost. Jake, there's just there's a lot of issues there. There's issues regarding the Second Amendment. There is the issue in terms of welfare reform. There's issues in relation to family and medical leave issues. There's issues in terms of Medicare for all. So you have a really, you have different people have different perspectives and views. And what I think, I feel pretty confident that I can listen and understand a lot of the concerns and the frustrations that a lot of folks who are, quote, voted for Trump but are not Trump supporters. So I think that kind of what distinguishes me. But again, that is the $64 question in terms of why it is that it's consistently so close.
So a lot of pundits in Washington would say in a district that close, you should run more to the right to pick up some straggler Republican votes or Trump voters, but you're running further to the left. So walk me through your logic on that.
Sure. So, I think when you look objectively speaking at a lot of the Trump, quote, I don't want to say supporters, but people who are just disenfranchised and are frustrated and disgusted and just want to throw out the whole entire political establishment, I can talk to a lot of the frustrations and the needs of these folks. I went to McDowell County, West Virginia, and I talked to folks who on average voted 76% for Donald Trump. And what I learned is that a lot of these people actually do believe in the issue of Medicare for all and tuition-free colleges and universities. So all I can tell you is that when I talk to these people, I feel like I can just understand a lot of their concerns and their frustrations, and I think we can reach out to a lot of these folks.
All right, and finally, on another personal note, I hear that it was your birthday yesterday. Is that right?
It was. Yes, it was.
Okay. Well, it was my birthday too, so apparently we share a birthday.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Happy belated birthday! That's
you
fantastic.
As well.
And we have an issue in terms of neither of us pronounce each other's name, which is a whole other interesting issue.
That's right. That's right. And I'm 48. You're 49. So lots of similarities there. I want to give the links to everybody so that they can see how to support you. And these obviously will be in the description box below on YouTube and the comment section on Facebook, so they're easy to click. SandersForCongress.com, and then obviously volunteers make a huge difference. And you're not taking any corporate PAC money, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so then you're going to need those small dollar donations, and they always make the difference. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. When we come back, it's really interesting experiment in Sacramento. They're going to take people who are living in poverty and just give them money. So Republican heads will explode. Well, we'll find out how that works when we return. we're back on Rebel headquarters. I've been telling you guys that we're going to talk to the mayor of Sacramento. Yeah, that's wrong. We're going to talk to the mayor of Stockton. Anyways, interesting experiment there, so let's get to it. Now joining me, Mayor of Stockton, California, Michael Tubbs, with a fascinating new experiment that they have over there. Mayor Tubbs, great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. And yes, Stockton, California.
Okay, so by the way, just before we get started on your interesting experiment, it says in your bio that you're the youngest elected official in Stockton history and one of the youngest elected in the nation overall. So how old are you?
I'm 27 now, but I started on city council when I was 22 and was elected mayor at 26.
Wow, that's change. Okay, and it's not just in age, you brought in change with you. So you've started the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration. It's SEED for short, clever, I get it. Okay, so what is it?
So SEED is the first city-led guaranteed income demonstration. So the idea is that right now we're still in the design phase, but the idea is that at least 100 families will be given $500 a month as a pilot or a demonstration to see that what happens when people are given what people call a basic income or universal basic income or a guaranteed income. So
Stockton is unfortunately way behind the rest of California, and that has nothing to do with you. Obviously, it went bankrupt back in 2012 when you were probably in junior high or something. And now 1 in 4 residents live below the poverty line. So you might have to give that $500 to an awful lot of people. So, but are you giving it to everybody, or is this just an experiment? And if it's an experiment, how many people do you give it to, and how do you decide?
So it's not. I don't like the term experiment. So it's more of a demonstration. We were able to get $1 million from the Economic Security Project and another $250,000 from the Goldrich Foundation. With that money, we're thinking we'll be able to serve 100 families at least with $500 a month for 18 months. And the idea is not that it's going to solve all the issues, but to really kind of help have a conversation in this country about the current economic conditions that many people live in. I know the folks I know in Stockton work incredibly hard. Some are migrant field workers, some are Uber drivers, some are teachers, et cetera, and all seem to be struggling in this economy. So the idea is to show the efficacy of the idea of a basic income with the hopes that will spark a larger discussion, not just in the city, but in the state and even the nation around sort of the economic floor people deserve.
And so you said 100 people for 18 months. When did the program begin?
So the program hasn't begun yet. We're in the design phase now. And the idea is that by Q3 or Q4 this year, we'll start the disbursement. And some of the questions on the design are many of the same things you brought up in terms of who will be selected, how are they selected, et cetera. We're also working with research partners. So we're interviewing some of the finest institutions in the world to come alongside us and help kind of research and document, and a storytelling partner as well. So we'll be able to show not just does it work or what do people do with the money, but also be able to tell some stories of resilience and strength and how something as simple as $500 a month can make a world of difference for families.
Yeah, it's a conundrum because if you pick exemplary people to give that money to, they might be in poverty, but they're willing to work hard, et cetera. Then it might be a skewed, I know you don't want to call it an experiment, demonstration, right?
Yes, sir.
On the other hand, if you pick people randomly, is that the right way to go? It's a really interesting question. So do you have a point of view on which way you should go on that?
Well, I'm a unbridled optimist. I truly think when given real opportunity, the vast majority of people are rational actors, even in economics. I think of basic income, I think of people like my mother or the people I grew up with who were brilliant and would find ways that $500 a month could really get to needs that maybe I wouldn't be able to foresee from my perch. So I think it'll be as random as possible. And for it to be realistic, there's going to be some people who probably don't do quote unquote good things with the dollars, but previous studies have shown, whether with the Alaska Permanent Fund in Alaska or the Eastern Band and Cherokee Native Americans, that more often than not, folks do good things and have good outcomes when given more economic opportunity.
And so what's the thesis here? What could they do with the $500 a month that could somehow, I mean, obviously could make their lives better in the short run, but what could they do with it to propel their lives in the long run?
Yeah, well, I think it's very case specific. So for some people, it might be $500 enough, dollars a month, excuse me, is enough for them to enter back into the workforce because they're able to afford childcare. For some people, it might be $500 a month is enough for them to pay for their books at the community college level. For some people, it might be $500 a month is enough for them not to have to work 2 or 3 jobs, but to stay home and spend time with their family or be a caregiver. For some people, it might be $500 a month might be enough to deal with rising rents and pay utility bills, which average about $500 a month. For some people, $500 a month might be enough to start a savings, since 1 in 2 Americans don't currently have $400 saved for an emergency.
Yeah, that is a stunning fact. It was mentioned in the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren town hall the other night. 46% of Americans cannot survive a $400 bill. They would be bankrupt and have to either take out a loan or not be able to pay it. So it's obviously something that could affect a lot of Americans. So now conservatives will say, yes, but Mayor Tubbs, you'll never get that money back. So it's not an efficient way to spend the money. And if we just give it, it's just gone. And it's not an investment. It's not like it's tax cuts for the rich in their point of view that stimulate the economy and then you get it back into the economy. That's what they will say. So how do you answer that?
Yeah, I'm not an economist, so I go strictly by common sense. And most people I know who are struggling in the economy are sometimes our biggest consumers. So I see a lot of those $500 being spent on other small businesses within the city, helping the city generate more sales tax dollars, et cetera. So I think the best investment we can make is in our people, but especially the vast majority of people who are currently struggling in our economic system. And I think an investment in them is probably more important to the long-term viability of our democracy than an investment in those who are already doing incredibly well.
Yeah, and there is, of course, a theory on how that money circulates much more if you give it to people who will immediately spend it, because almost all of them, other than the small amount of savings that you alluded to earlier, will, by definition, since they live in poverty, will have to spend it, and then it goes right back into the economy. So that'll be an interesting part of the experiment as well. And I see in Stockton, the average household income or median is $44,797, which is way below the rest of California, which is at over $61,000. So that's another reason why it'll probably very likely go right back into the economy. So will there be a number of experiments here? Is this, you do this first one, let's say you pick people randomly or however you got, the academics and the politicians, et cetera, the representatives wind up picking them. Then will there be, for example, when they give loans to small business across the world, different organizations do, they have noticed, and it's not a good thing, and I wish it weren't the case because I'm a guy, you're a guy, but it turns out women spend it a lot better.
Oh, absolutely.
So is there going to be a second experiment where maybe you give it just to women and see if that turns out to be better?
I think that'd be a great idea. If there's any funders who are interested in investing in Stockton women, Michael Tubbs, my email is mayor@stocktonca.gov. My Twitter is @MichaelDTubbs. We'd be very interested in entertaining that as well, because the idea is that we think a guaranteed income can be an answer, but we also understand there's a multitude of answers, and we are the people hit oftentimes the hardest by a lot of the contemporary issues we're having in society. So we're being very bold and wise about seeking opportunities to try new things that would better the conditions for the folks.
Yeah, and look, I want to be clear, and this is back and forth. My sense, I'm not sure it's going to work. I have no idea, and that's why I'm really curious about it. And it might not work, or it might not work, but we might learn something tangential that winds up being really important that we could use in another program. Or this one might not work, and the next one might work if you direct it towards women or some other way of structuring it. Maybe 500 is not the right number. Maybe it's 1,000. Maybe we should do an experiment with 1,000. So I can't wait. Can't wait to see how this is going to turn out.
And I'm in complete agreement with you. And I also think we probably both agree that the current system's not working for the vast majority of people either. So we have to begin thinking about, okay, what are some other things we can do to improve and work on the social safety net. So I'm a nerd and I'm incredibly excited to see what happens. Like when it's out in the world, when people have it, what actually happens and how do we take those learnings and translate that into policy. So I'm in full agreement with you.
Yeah, and it's great that you got private-public cooperation here so you can raise the money from other places as well. So now I'm going to have you back on the show once you guys have implemented it, and then we see the results. No question about it. But I am curious now on a separate note. Go back to what we started with. How in the world did you become mayor at the age of 26? How'd you win the race?
Oh, that's it. Well, I was on city council for 4 years. And in Stockton at the time, to run for city council, you had to run citywide. So because of that campaign, I had built a citywide sort of following and base. And during the 4 years I was on city council, I worked really closely with community groups to really improve the southern part of the city. So we opened health clinics, opened banks, closed problem liquor stores. The community really responded to that leadership. And several people pushed me and urged me to run for mayor. So I ran and campaigned and ran ragged and door knocked and phone banged and got chased by dogs. And we were able to win the primary with 8 people by 9 points. And then we won the general with 71% of the vote. But a lot of it, as a person of faith, I attributed to that, but also just the hard work and kind of coalition we built over 4 years and really a track record of not being perfect, but actually getting things done.
All right, Michael Tubbs, absolutely fascinating mayor and a fascinating experiment in Stockton. Everybody check out the links down below for the StocktonDemonstration.org, but also we'll put up the email that Michael mentioned earlier in the show as well. So Mayor Tubbs, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
All right, great to have you. All right, now we're gonna take a quick break here, and for the members, we're gonna come right back. We're gonna talk about why millennial men are now leaning a little bit more to the right. Not overall, but the numbers are moving in the wrong direction. And then we might get to one other story from the show. So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member and watch the post game with us. All right, we'll see you there.